Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I hope you can all hear me fine. We will start in a few minutes. We are now letting people in. So just a moment of your time and we will officially start. Meantime, let me share the starting presentation for today. Okay. So welcome, everybody. You see people are still coming in. So we'll give it 1 minute more and then we will start. Curious to all see you here to discuss this topic of agricultural data infrastructures as key enablers. We are excited for the 1.5 hours to come in this. Okay, a few minutes behind after 5 o'clock here in the Netherlands. So I will make a start with the webinar. Thanks all for joining. My name is Sanne Jans. I'm from Wageningen University and Research and coordinator of the Digital Agri Hub. And we are very happy to host this webinar on agricultural data infrastructures as key enablers. The idea came out of a discussion on D groups we were having on the D4Ag D groups, where there was a lot of interest to discuss data sharing and why data sharing is happening or not happening. And then we decided, together with Ben Adam from the Commonwealth Secretariat, let's host this webinar to go deeper into this. So to really think through and discuss with you what are these agricultural data infrastructures, why are they happening or not happening, and what can we do to make them happen more. This idea today is that it's really to share information from us, but also really to discuss with you about what your insights are, what your thoughts are about this topic. We planned 1.5 hours for this, so let me just show you what the plan is for this 1.5 hour. We have invited 3 speakers to outline their thoughts around agricultural data infrastructures and why they're happening and why they're not happening. So we'll start with Ben from the Commonwealth Secretariat, and then we will lay down his vision on agricultural data infrastructures, what they are and what aspects are important, and experiences. Then we go to Henry from the FAO, who will speak more about the digital public goods and the experience from the FAO on digital infrastructures. And finally, we'll go to Andrea from CJAR, who will share experiences more on building data infrastructures for research, and what that means in terms of connecting different institutes and all this. We hope that this presentation part will take about 45 minutes of the webinar, and then we will plan to go into a discussion with all of you. And yeah, so please, if you have questions to the presenters, post them in the chat. If you have more discussion questions, also post them in the chat and we will come back to them. We'll try as best, we will try our best to do these, to answer as many questions as they come up while we are presenting. But yeah, if you have thoughts or ideas, then let us know. Also, and the second part will really be more involving. We'll use Mentimeter to get your thoughts and about all this. And we know it's a big topic, so we are also curious what you think and what your ideas are. Maybe just to say what Digital Agri Hub is. Just as we are today hosting and why we are hosting Digital Agri Hub, we are collecting digital solutions on the lower and middle income countries. That you can find them on the dashboard, digitalagrihub.org. That's where they all are. Wageningen University and Research is hosting and maintaining this collection of data points, and that's sort of one small thing in that way. We are a small offering, a sort of digital building block, if you like, for tracking digital solutions. We have a lot of them on our dashboard. You can view more details on them, and you can also see knowledge products which are more of an assessment of how these products are working, how digital solutions are providing added value or not, or how the inclusion is incorporated, or how climate and environmental concerns are being addressed. Now, as Digital Agri Hub, we see, of course, that we have all these solutions happening and that they are very, I don't want to say fragmented, but we want them to grow bigger, and we want them to be more successful and to grow bigger faster. That's, I think, crucial for digital agriculture to reach a lot more people and to reach a lot more impact. Now, in a way, what needs to happen for these digital solutions to grow, in our view, is also that digital infrastructures are available, like a highway, for them to run fast on. Now we are maybe too much on small roads, small windy roads for digital solutions, where we have a lot of turns and a lot of learning, but they lack this highway idea to reach really scale. So that's why we are hosting this webinar today. We are curious to get more into how can we build the digital agriculture infrastructure as a highway. How can we make it go faster so that we reach more impact at scale. With that, that's what today's setup is, and I hope we learn a lot of each other, and I really invite you to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat, and to make sure that we get these questions. Later on, we'll discuss more. First, I will now stop my introduction here, and I will invite Ben to give his intervention first and to give his vision on digital agriculture infrastructures and what his experiences are. Thanks all. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Hope you can hear me, and let me try to share my screen. Okay, good. Let me try to share my screen. So I'm using multiple screens. So if you see me looking somewhere up, know that I'm looking at the screen, not directly before me. So, but hopefully you'll be able to see my face and the screen as well. So thank you for joining. I can see a lot of people joining. That shows that there's interest in the topic. And we'll try to present our vision, what we've been thinking about. I got connected with somebody, and the person said, I'm an engineer. So the engineer saw the infrastructure and is attracted to it. So I believe there are all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds that would like to know more about this. So let me continue from here. I'll tell you just slide about my organization and what I do. So I work for the Commonwealth Secretariat, and I work on a program called the Commonwealth Connectivity Agenda for Trade and Investment. And the core part of the program is to boost intra-Commonwealth trade between Commonwealth countries, as well as investment, expand investment. So what we are coming to talk about, the basis of that is about trade and investment, even though, you know, you see advisory services, policy making and all that, but just start thinking about how data infrastructure can facilitate trade and investment between countries. So, national agricultural data infrastructure, I would like all of you who are on the call to put something in the text, in the chat box, or, you know, the chat box. What comes to mind when you see this national agricultural data infrastructure? What is it? You know, what attracted you? Why did you come to listen to this? Feel free to type something that this is what I think national agricultural data infrastructure should be, you know, as I continue with my presentation. So I would like to talk about national, then agricultural data, then infrastructure, and then I'll put them together. So the national part of what we are talking about at the Commonwealth Secretariat is that it's more than government. So if you take a country, it's not just government services or government infrastructure, but it's a national infrastructure that takes into consideration both public and private. So not just government infrastructure, but a national infrastructure. So please take note of this, public and private infrastructure. Then agricultural data, what we mean. So just what we mean by agricultural data. So we are saying that when we talk about agricultural data, we are talking about one, content data. That is any data that form the essence or the substance, information or intelligence in either its unprocessed form or processed form. So anything relating to agronomic data, weather data, production data, market data, those are the content data that we do analyze to provide information, to provide advisory services, to provide, you know, substance, intelligence. I was talking to somebody recently and I was asking, you know, he said he has a business model that is free for users, for farmers. And I asked, so what is it? What is your business model? He said, I get intelligence. You know, I don't use farmers' data. I don't hold farmers' data, but it's the intelligence that is what I use. It's not the data. So let's understand, is that agronomic data that you are collecting from farmers, is it, you know, data or is just intelligence? You know, so then the second part of data is the user data. That's the identification part. You can refer to it as, you know, farmer information or information about the enterprise or the groups or consumers or traders. So those are the identifiable, you know, parameters that would say this person belongs to this. This farmer is located here. So those are the identity. That's the user data. So we are saying these two groups of data is what we are talking about as agricultural data. And we are saying that a country's agricultural data can be considered as its national resource. So just as, you know, I'm from Ghana. If you go to Ghana, Ghana has gold. So gold is a national resource for Ghana. So I'm saying that Ghana's agricultural data can also be considered as national resource, okay? So now let's go to infrastructure. What is an infrastructure? The engineers will start thinking, what is it? What is an infrastructure? I will talk about the definition of it by Wikipedia. I'm not going to quote all the full definition, but it says that the set of facilities and systems that serve a country or a city to function. So a set of facilities and systems. So I want you to take note of that as we combine all these terms that is in the National Agricultural Data Infrastructure. So set of facilities and systems. Infrastructure facilitates the creation and growth of other systems and services. So the infrastructure forms the fundamental building blocks that allow other innovations to thrive. So you have set of facilities and systems that facilitate the creation and growth of other systems and services. And those sets of facilities and systems form the fundamental building blocks for innovation. So that is how we see infrastructure. So if you're an engineer or whatever, you can also put your definition of infrastructure in the text box. So now I want to give you an example of a national infrastructure before going into national agricultural data infrastructure. I'm going to put an image on the screen. It's AI generated image. So don't you can ask me all kinds of questions, but this is AI generated image of a typical example of national road infrastructure. You see some text over there that has no meaning. You see some people walking onto the road. You see some rocks in the middle of the road. You see that all the cars are just going one way at the toll booth, all kinds of issues relating to the infrastructure. But forget about those things. Forget about those things. What I want you to take is that a national infrastructure is not just a component, as we defined earlier. It's a set of facilities and systems. So we want to take at least 4 of those sets to describe what we can see on the screen right now. So the first one is, there's a technology behind the infrastructure. It's a technology. So we can refer to the tarmac on which the cars are driving as the technology, which has been built with some standards so that cars can drive on it, whether you are driving a bus or you are in Uber, you are in a taxi, your private car, you can all fit onto the road. It has a standard that fits every car. So that's the technology, and that allows cars to drive and follow that standard. Then, so that's the technology for the infrastructure. If you take a real, track, it's the same thing. Trains, the same way. Public train comes, private train comes. They all go through the same track. It's designed to meet all those. That's the technology. Then there's also a policy part, a regulation part. So you can see some road signs in this infrastructure. You can see some markings on the road. You can see some, signs there that is guiding, directing, and instructing people and the cars what to do, like speed limit, stop sign, you can't stop here, this is roundabout, this is that, this is only for pedestrian. You have signs, regulations, instructions, guidance. That is the policy part of the infrastructure. So you have the technology, you have the policy. So the policy part guides or allow people to actually, and the cars to drive on the technology, the tarmac. Then you have a business model. So it's a national infrastructure. You have a business model. You can see the toll booth. So when you drive through the toll booth, you have to pay something. It's not free. Yeah, even if you're a diplomat, you are not paying direct. Somebody is paying. So if you have a CD card and they say, oh, you can drive through for free, somebody is paying for it. So, but you have to pay. There's a revenue model behind the infrastructure. You see the human beings may work on it without paying. You can see that they may work on it for free, but others pay so that potholes can be maintained, the road signs can be put in place when they are broken down, and all kinds of things. If you overspeed, If you go against the regulations, you are fine. That's also a revenue stream to be able to maintain and pay those who are working on the road. So there's a revenue stream behind infrastructure. So even though it's a national, some people will say it's a public infrastructure, so it's free. It's not free. You know, it can be public infrastructure, but not necessarily free for people to use. Some may use it for free, some may have to pay. So that is the business part. Then the fourth part is, you can see a building at the right upper corner over there. There's an entity that applies the regulations, that ensures the business model to take care of the infrastructure. Okay, so that entity is what is the governance or the administration of the infrastructure. So there should be an entity, depending on your country. It could be the DVLA or Office of Roads and Rails or whatever you may, call it. So there's an entity, a governance mechanism that makes sure that the technology is functioning, policies are being followed, business, a model is working, people are generating revenue to pay, and then, making sure that everything works. So those are the four set of facilities, basically, components that we are saying that should be part of a national infrastructure as we apply, and making sure that everything works. So those are the four set of facilities, basically, components that we are saying that should be part of a national infrastructure as we apply it to agricultural data. So you have the technology, the policy, business and market part, as well as administration. There was a day I was living in the Netherlands. I was driving from Barcelona through France to the Netherlands. And not knowing, I oversped, on the road. And I didn't know that my number plate was captured. I got to the Netherlands within a week, I got a ticket. Why do you think that happened? It's because of the ID of my car. The ID, the identity number that, the number plate was captured by camera, and they know who Bernardo was living in the Netherlands, was living in this address, and they followed and sent the ticket to me because of that identity. So what I'm saying is the infrastructure, the technology has a standard, has some identities, elements, cameras, and all kinds of things embedded. So take all this into consideration as we go to the National Agricultural Data Infrastructure discussion. So National Agricultural Data Infrastructure, as this will make it simple for us to now explain. So we are saying that national resources such as gold, oil, and data need national infrastructure to manage. So if agricultural data is a national infrastructure, then if agricultural data is a national resource, then agricultural data needs national infrastructure to manage, just as gold and oil, need infrastructure to manage. So this is the framework that we have been using so far to explain this. As I explained already, it will make it simple now. So the technology part, what we are saying is for each country, a national infrastructure, for each country, we need a backbone technology to harmonize, integrate, and support data exchange. A backbone technology that has some standards, that is interoperable between countries, that has some identity element to support users. So you need a backbone technology, not another platform to compete with existing service providers. So Go to Ghana, you have platforms, Tractor, Farmer Line, Isoko, all kinds of platforms. You have all other, service providers. This backbone technology is supposed to support them, not to compete with them. So it's a backbone like, the tarmac, and then they ride on it. So the cars, the taxis, the buses are like the platforms that are, sharing the same infrastructure. Then the policy part are the stop signs, the traffic lights, the speed limit. So all the regulations to guide the use of the infrastructure. And for example, if you drive between Belgium and, Germany, you cross from one country to the other. The only difference you see is the signboard telling you that you are entering Belgium. The road is the same, but you are moving from one country's sovereign state to another. So you need to observe the regulations in Belgium. So you need to follow the policies in that country. So our countries need to have policies and guides to manage that infrastructure. The business model, as I said, we need finance and investment, and that's the key part that we are interested in today. How do we invest in this national infrastructure? The administration, the governance part is the most sensitive part. What we are saying is that you need a neutral entity to manage the infrastructure because it's both public and private. So it's not just government. Government should drive the process, but let's identify an independent, governance mechanism that represents all stakeholders to enable them, to give them trust to share data so that, data can be accessed. Anybody looking for data can have access and all kinds of products can be developed. But if you give it to a government or you give it to one private entity, it's going to be difficult for people to open their data system. My time is running up. The good news is that we are not proposing any new things to be built. What we are saying is that we already have those fundamental building blocks in our countries. You remember the definition that the infrastructure, those fundamental building blocks, there are a lot of data systems in our countries already. There are a lot of platforms that have gathered data, collected farmers' data, invested in weather data, agronomic data, polygons of fields all over in our countries. So we're not going to start building anything new. The building blocks are there. All that Commonwealth Secretariat is saying is coordination. So I want to give you an example. Kenya. If you go to Kenya, I was searching on the internet, you will see all kinds of development organizations, private sector, all investing in different parts, different building blocks of agricultural data in the country. All kinds of investment already. So why should we go and start something new? They are there. They have already invested in them. So as I was saying, we have the building blocks. There are data governance frameworks in our countries. There are data technologies, all over. And the regulations are there that, you can pull together. There's DPI, as we may be hearing. The building blocks are already there. So the vision for the Commonwealth Secretariat is that just bringing together these existing fundamental building blocks of agricultural data, using countries as the unit of deployment. It's not about building a new system. It's about identifying all these building blocks, identify, an independent entity that is willing to play that role, that everybody can trust, and, ensure that these blocks are working. And once you do that in Kenya, you do it in Bangladesh, you do it in India, you do it in Ghana, Fiji, Barbados, and these are interoperable. you are building a huge data system, a huge agricultural data system that is going to support trade and investment, that's going to support policy making, reliable policy making, that's going to support advisory service providers. The cost of data, investment in data is going to go down because everybody is going to share. You will not go and pay for something that somebody has already paid and collected, because we are not saying that they should centralize the data. We are saying that, just harmonization. So you can see it as a bottom-up approach where, we piece together the existing systems, facilities at country level to give rise to more complex infrastructure at regional and global level. So I will stop there. I think my time is up. So I'll stop there and hand over back to the moderator. Thank you very much, Sandra.
Thanks, Ben, for sharing these insights and this national this vision on data infrastructures and the nice road network that was working perfectly in a way. So that's very good. I think there are 3 questions in the Q&A. I think one. Thanks, Ben, for sharing these insights and this national this vision on data infrastructures and the nice road network that was working perfectly in a way. So that's very good. I think there are 3 questions in the Q&A. I think one that's very interesting is maybe just why, Unbelief through Ndenge is asking, why do we start off with national data infrastructures? Is it because the policy is nationally dictated? Because, agriculture doesn't stop nicely at the country boundaries and then changes the system, but it sort of goes this continuous thing. So you probably thought about that from the Commonwealth Secretariat. What's your view on this, Ben?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So the road, let's go back to the road. Countries build their road infrastructure. The tarmac is built by countries and they are connected to each other, right? You don't start building a road for Europe. Each country build their infrastructure and they are connected. That is what works. The challenge with taking it from the top down is what we have now. What we have now is every development organization is coming to our countries with their frameworks and tools, building something in the countries. Private sector guys, because of their business, they come in and build something. So imagine 20, 30 years ago, assuming that our countries have this in place, then those coming in were not coming to build anything. The infrastructure will have been in place and they will come and build their services on it. But because there was no infrastructure at country level, when they got there, they had to build their own database, we call it database, to be able to provide insurance services, advisory services, tractor services, So if we can now pull those together, then we're going to prevent future duplication of those data systems. So we are saying the country should be the unit of, easier unit of deployment.
Yeah, some level of organization chosen. Thanks, Ben. I will now go to, we will come back with more questions to you. There are a few more questions for you in the Q&A, so if you want to check them and answer, then that's great. We'll now go to Henry from FAO to give, I think with the country discussion, we also logically going to an organization like FAO, which sort of is a member multilateral organization. So curious to see how the FAO thinks about digital infrastructures. Henry, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sander. This is not a mistake. This is actually the title, Digital Public Infrastructure, because I will try to focus not only on data infrastructure, but a bit broader on what we see as an important element of putting a data infrastructure in place and how we work together on digital public infrastructure and how innovation, data, and digital come into play there. So as part of our FAO strategic framework, we have a FAO, what we call FAO program priority area in place on digital agriculture, which aims to provide affordable access to digital networks and digital public goods. Because we believe that these are really paramount to unleash the potential of rural communities and reap the digital dividends, and thereby contributing to the 2030 agenda. So one of our flagship initiatives is called the Digital Villages Initiative. So we really would like to go the last mile. But how do you do that? As Ben rightly mentioned, if there's no infrastructure in place, how do you reach rural communities with digital services? So we believe that we should try and strengthen FAO's role in promoting the adoption and the use of digital technologies to facilitate the transformation towards inclusive and sustainable agri-food systems. And we do that through the promotion of better and more timely access to real-time actionable, this is important, data, information, and knowledge. Also through sustained engagement with farmers and agri-food system stakeholders. So for example, agripreneurs, startups, policymakers. So the whole range of stakeholders to maximize the benefit from these new technologies. Through improved access to markets, credit, and insurance. So you could think about geospatial data for micro insurance and microcredit through the application of these digital technologies. And also to provide access to digitally enabled climate smart agriculture solutions. And lastly, by enhancing the digitalization of emergency interventions and social protection mechanisms. So the fragmentation is huge. There's a lot available, but we're not really reusing it to really benefit rural communities and reap these digital benefits. So therefore, we believe that we should apply a portfolio approach to embrace digital transformation to enhance effectiveness and efficiency, and shifting the focus towards digital solutions to address global challenges in agri-food systems, and there are many. For example, there's the roadmap, the SDG 2 roadmap that FAO launched during COP 28 on how to achieve SDG 2 and stay within a 1.5 degrees. And the challenges that are laid out there are 120 in 10 different domains. So there's a lot of challenges, and digital solutions can really contribute to that. So the portfolio approach provides a nice segue into what we call the Digital Impact Exchange, which is a collaboration that FAO is doing with the Digital Impact Alliance. And we are both part of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, so we're both member of them. So this is something that we promote within the program priority area on digital agriculture. It's a platform designed to map out the digital ecosystem where we apply a digital public goods first approach. So it's not digital public goods exclusively, but it's a digital public goods first approach. So let's try and reuse first what is already available. As I mentioned, FAO is a member of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative which was launched in 2019 at the request of the UN Secretary General to better work together on digital cooperation. At the moment, there are more than 30 international member organizations member, and it's growing very rapidly. So, for example, GitHub and ThoughtWorks, but also the Open Knowledge Foundation, DIAL, and FAO, and also UNDP and UNICEF, they're all members of the Alliance. And the Digital Public Goods Alliance is a custodian of the DPG standard, and it manages the certification process and the registry, and coordinates the work of the Digital Public Goods Alliance through the roadmap. And if you're interested, they issue a Digital Public Goods ecosystem report every year, which highlights how organizations are contributing to the work of the Alliance. So what are digital public goods? They can be defined as open source software, open data, open AI models, open standards, and open content that adhere to privacy and other applicable laws and best practices, do no harm, and help attain the SDGs. So this is the definition that was provided by the UN Secretary General, and it's part of the roadmap for digital cooperation. In the work of FAO, we are using many certified digital public goods. The ones that are highlighted in bold are FAO digital public goods, but we also use many digital public goods that are foundational for the work of FAO. So for example, CCAN, which is a tool that has been proposed and developed by the Open Knowledge Foundation many years ago. I don't remember how many years ago, but a long time ago, is at the heart of the FAO data catalog. And it's also used by an initiative which is called AgriFin's Proud platform, where they store open content. So this is really a way for Sprout to provide open content that is used for extension services, for example. Another example is the integration of CPEL and Open Forest, which are tools that are in use by FAO. And I saw in the chat a question from Alexander about the EU deforestation regulation. So one of the things that the team has been working on is the integration of these tools together with a tool which has been developed by the AgStack Foundation, which is called GeoID. So this is a way to collaborate and make sure that CPEL, Open Forest, is interoperable with GeoID to better monitor, for example, this regulation. Another important digital public goods is the FAO hand-in-hand geospatial platform, which is currently rebranded into the agroinformatics platform. It uses, for example, CCAN, but another open source tool, which is Teria.js for the visualization of the geospatial data. And it uses a whole range of standards, for example, the OGC standard for geospatial data, but also several other standards. And it uses a lot of metadata to make sure that the catalog really describes well what data is available there. So how does this relate to digital public infrastructure? This is an overview provided by the UNDP on digital transformation framework, which describes, for example, several use cases that are in place to different sectors, and also the role that the different entities can play. And in the middle, I don't know if you can read it, but there's three elements of digital public infrastructure, which is digital identity, digital payments, and also data exchange. So these are identified as three core elements of digital public infrastructure. So of course, there's an overlap between digital public goods and digital public infrastructure. And it's not a simple puzzle. It's not that you can say, okay, you just put 3 or 4 digital public goods together and then you have your infrastructure. It's not that simple, unfortunately. But at the same time, by looking at it from a use case point of view and building blocks point of view and products point of view, if we describe the elements that we have in the digital public goods and digital public infrastructure in a much better way on how they can be reused, we believe that we can reuse a lot of the digital public goods to put a digital public infrastructure in place. Here, FAO, through the membership of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, we are contributing to the 50 and 5 initiative, which aims to implement digital public infrastructure in 50 countries within 5 years. And these are the 3 elements, digital payments, digital identity, but also data exchange. And behind data exchange, there's a whole world, of course, because there's many different use cases that apply. So here we mapped 2 examples. One specifically for the use of farmers, and the other one more for strategic insights using big data. So here you can see that at the bottom level, you have the digital public infrastructure core capabilities. So for the top use case, these are identity, payments, and data exchange. And then a digital public good could be, for example, the farmer registration. And already in the digital public goods registry, there are several tools available, open source tools available that can be used for farmer registration, or at least the building blocks that could consist or could compose this farmer registration. And then on top, these are the services that could be, for example, digital advisory or mobile cash or early warning services that can be provided to small-scale producers. And at the bottom, there's another use case, which is more related to providing access to market prices, for example, or that could be, for example, digital advisory or mobile cash or early warning services that can be provided to small-scale producers. And at the bottom, there's another use case, which is more related to providing access to market prices, for example, or water accountability and plant health, which can be built on top of the hand-in-hand geospatial platform. So as I mentioned, the geospatial platform uses a data catalog with a lot of metadata and a lot of it's a federated system, so it doesn't mean that all the data needs to be put in one place, but it can federate data from different sources by using this digital public good, which is called CCAN. So through the work of the Digital Agriculture Program Priority Area of FAO, we're currently working together with the Digital Impact Alliance. So just to recall, they were fundamental in presenting the digital principles, which go back more than 10 years, or maybe even longer than that. So the methodology that they developed of the digital principles to design with the user and to make sure that you don't duplicate, but you reuse tools that are already out there. They came up with the idea of the digital impact exchange to look at the digital ecosystem in a much broader way. So don't focus only on products, but also look at use cases and building blocks. And also look at the supporting tools. So supporting tools could be, for example, playbooks and digital public goods, the 5 categories that I mentioned before. So if we can make sure that as much of the information about digital ecosystems is available in the exchange, we can much better support countries, our members, with advice. And Sander, for example, the Digital Impact Exchange contains all the Digital Agri Hub entries. So they're all available also in the exchange. It's not a duplication, but it's just registering the whole Digital Agri Hub entries. But also all the digital public goods are available here. And many FAO products are already available in the exchange, and this is an initiative that we are currently working on. So how does this contribute to our innovation approach? In our strategic framework, we have 4 accelerators, which are technology, innovation, data, and complements. And especially the topic of today is, of course, around data. So we strongly believe that data can really be catalytical for the implementation of our strategic framework and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is supported by the Science and Innovation Strategy and also the roadmap of the Office of Innovation, which contains our new global innovation model with incubators, accelerators, and innovation hubs. So this is the way that we support the implementation of the strategic framework and the SDGs with the intention to move much more towards a programmatic approach and towards a portfolio approach. So there's so much fragmentation also in the project design, and as Ben mentioned rightly, there's a lot of projects and initiatives that already have put in place data infrastructure in one way or another, and it's really the challenge to make them play much better together. So last slide is a few reflections on what we can do to put the agricultural data infrastructure in place. So interoperability is really a key precondition, and digital public goods and digital public infrastructure can be enablers. For example, the OGC standards or the AgStack GeoID, but there are many other examples. Vocabularies help provide a common perspective. For example, AgriVoc, which is FAO's biggest vocabulary, and this has also been approved recently in January as a digital public good of FAO. And we think that by making it a digital public good, we can get more sustained support for these kind of digital public goods. Metadata is really important. And the FAO data catalog based on the digital public goods CCAN provides a lot of metadata, so you can more easily discover what data is available. But that doesn't mean that it has to sit in one place. It's really a federated system. Data partnerships can increase the impact of data and reduce redundant and very costly processes. Think about, for example, data sharing agreements that you have to do with each and every partner. So through the data partnerships, like the one for forestry, but also the development data partnership, which is now being implemented by the World Bank, these redundant processes can be drastically reduced, and we can come up with common frameworks to share data. But at the same time, the incentives to work together are not really in place at the moment. Coordination is extremely costly, and it's oftentimes not built in by design. So I think there's a lot to gain, and maybe in a discussion we can go a little bit deeper into that. But the incentives are oftentimes upside down, and we're doing a lot of reverse engineering rather than building the right incentives in from the outset. And lastly, as I mentioned, the Digital Impact Exchange provides these reusable building blocks and use cases. And gradually during the year, we'll be promoting this more and more. So with that, Sander, thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you, Henry, for this very good overview of what FAO is doing, and it's great to hear FAO's commitment to digital public goods and these open availability. There's a lot of, there's a deep richness, I think, in here on what you are suggesting in partnerships and metadata. So it's all work for everybody to really do that. And we are good, I think, at producing data, but not good at documenting data and all these very basic things. There's a question from John here who says, can we correctly say that national agricultural data infrastructures is a DPI instance, a digital public good instance? So what Ben is suggesting a sort of building block for what you are, where you are taking it further. Is that a correct interpretation of it? You see that in the same way, or think that's different, Henry?
Well, I think that's correct. No, I mean what we're trying to say is there's a lot already available. No, both open source, software, but also open data that can be reused. There's already a lot of standards available and content. So rather than recreating this from the outset, try to look in your programmatic initiatives. Try to look what's already available. No. What are the use cases that are already implemented in several countries? What kind of building blocks are available? And try to reuse them as much as possible. So it doesn't mean that if you build your data infrastructure in a country at the national level, that you have to only use these building blocks. But at least if we document them better, and if we provide much more, let's say, context around them, there's already a lot that can be reused. So also for national data infrastructures. But the policies, I mean, as Ben rightly mentioned, sometimes prevent data from being stored in the cloud, no? Or so the data needs to be stored in national data centers. But even then, for cataloging the data, there's a lot of tools already out there that can be used and that are much more sustainable rather than building a bespoke system from scratch.
Thanks, Henry, for this additional answer. We go to Andrea now to hear more about how a research organization like CJA deals with this and what you have discovered in your research on digital infrastructures. So, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sander. Can you see my screen? I think you can, right?
Yes, I can see your screen and also
Okay.
put in presentation mode.
Okay, thank you. So as Sander just mentioned, I'm going to try to bring some insights from research to these conversations, similar to what has been said already. We have some collection of learnings bringing some good insights in terms of how we can move forward. So just to summarize what digital infrastructure is, or some concrete insights that we should take into account about digital infrastructure, we normally tend to think that infrastructure is there, but it's often invisible until they break. So we don't really know what infrastructure is until they are not working. Infrastructure generates externalities, so we have to understand any type of infrastructure has trade-offs, and understanding which trade-offs, which are they, and how to use them is very important. And they don't really scale smoothly. So scaling infrastructure is something that is challenging in most of the cases. Also, markets don't always provide the infrastructures we need. So we always get the question on, is it public digital infrastructure or private digital infrastructure? And the short answer to that is, in some cases, we don't know. No, it depends on who is there to provide the infrastructure and who has the right incentive and the right environment to generate what is required for that particular process. Also, what we're used to think of physical and economic infrastructures, key social institutions are also infrastructures, and we need to understand who they are, what is the role, and what is the main incentive again. And finally, on these insights from digital infrastructure, an open or external platform can be defined as products, services, or technologies developed by one or more firms where other firms build upon. So key thing here is that infrastructures are things that we build so we can build other things. So based on that, I thought it would be interesting to go to other sector, like the health sector, who has done also a good job in terms of defining their digital infrastructures and using the digital infrastructures for achieving the health sector goals, mainly public health and increasing health in the global south as well. So here we have one concrete example where it has been found that digital infrastructure has significantly improved health. And they have improved the utilization of medical services, help residents develop healthy lifestyles, and increase people health investment. So this is just an example of evidence, research-based evidence, where digital infrastructure has been proven to help. Another one on that is digital infrastructure as a determinant of health equity. And it's interesting to understand what are the social dynamics that happen after digital infrastructures are put in place. So in this case, it was found that areas of greater socioeconomic disadvantage were significantly less likely to receive the highest quality infrastructure, which means at the end that social inequalities increase sometimes. So we also have to be aware of what are the trade-offs, again, as I was saying, of any digital infrastructure that we put together. Here we have the famous case of the electronic health records that were super famous during pandemics because they were using those electronic health reports to share data from patients. And this is from 2022. And these particular analyses concludes that the electronic health records impedes face-to-face communication and only promotes task-oriented and very concrete communication from nurses to the patients. So also saying, of course, these type of technologies also hinder sometimes communication and relationships between nurses and patients. This is one. And the other one is on privacy. So privacy in electronic health records is arising as an issue. So it is a challenge to maintain traceability by recording metadata that can be mapped to private data, which is something that it's also good to consider. No, privacy in relation to records, very detailed records of people, what type of data are we recording and how are we managing that, is something that in the health sector is a bit advanced in these processes of digital infrastructure are rising now. This is from 2023. Also, before passing to the agri-food systems, one more from the health sector is what happened during pandemics, actually. This is 2020, where they were mapping in this Nature article what was, the network of different technologies that were being used, and some of the concrete use cases that were supported by the technologies that were at the moment interconnected. So they have online data sources for early disease detection. The network was already there. They were communicating and sharing data with the existing infrastructure, and while they were building urgent infrastructure for the pandemic. So online data sources were available. Data visualization tools for decision support were available at the government level, at the health system level, at the hospital levels as well. Rapid case identification was a key thing. So infrastructures were available to provide rapid decision making and digital contact tracing as well. Those are some use cases that were successes from the health sector in the pandemics that we could look at if we were going to think of what is the right digital infrastructure for agri-food systems. So I'll go there. We have a recent publication on digital innovation ecosystems in agri-food, where they basically, on the left side of the slide, you see where they think we are. So they have IT integration level in the lower X. They have a number of stakeholders in the upper X, and they believe these authors believe that at this point in time, we are in this place where we are working on data platforms, data spaces, data economy, and food systems already are there with a significant level of integration and a significant level of number of stakeholders. We might agree or disagree. This has been published and they said, this is our current state. How are we organizing for that? So my take would be, yes, we are here, but we're not really organized. And what they say is a common technical architecture and infrastructure is needed to facilitate already what is happening in that current state that we have. So they propose a strategic project planning. As we have heard before, one way of going or moving forward is, instead of thinking as a high level, how do we do that? This is so complex. How are we going to collaborate among each other? Starting at the project level or at the portfolio level makes a lot of sense. And having a common technical infrastructure for that level of portfolio management makes a lot of sense. And this is what they are proposing here, basically. So this is another term I wanted to introduce here, which is digital platforms. And if I go back here at the current state, as you can see in the ellipse here, we already have data platforms. What are data platforms? What are digital platforms is still a bit unsure. But what we know from some research, recent research from last year and maybe 2 or 3 years before, is that digital platforms are technology environments that are portable across computational infrastructure, extensible to new capacities or capabilities, secure and protect data, facilitate standards-based interoperability, and enable data processing and analysis. So I think we're all talking about along very similar lines in terms of interoperability, data standards, common and agreements about how we treat data, agreements about how we name things in agriculture as well. One key thing that has been raised here is that the platform business model differs from the traditional one in the way of monetizing the market supply. So the platforms are actually integrating different services, existing different services, and summing up the value added by each of the services. And they need to understand what are the incentives of the business, what are the incentives in the market, and who's willing to provide that neutral platform to aggregate the different services. So this is another one before I go to some concrete examples. This vision of digital public infrastructure for agriculture was published as a policy brief for the T20 last year. And this idea proposes an enabling framework of services and agricultural data exchange to support various use cases, as I was saying, at the portfolio level, while ensuring data and application interoperability through APIs. So the key to making this vision a reality, as it has been published in the policy brief, lies in three main structures. The first one is the building blocks that you can see below, which refers basically to existing software, code, platforms, and applications that are already interoperable or that are preparing themselves to be interoperable and provide a basic digital service at scale. The second one is the digital public good. So as it has been mentioned today, there are open source software, open data, open AI models, open standards, and open content that adhere to privacy and other applicable laws to do no harm by design and help attain the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is attached to accelerating or ensuring there is an enabling environment to achieve the common goals of the Global South, basically. That's important to be noted. And the third one is a digital public infrastructure, which is the framework itself driven by APIs that are interconnecting, playing a crucial role in integrating the different building blocks that I have mentioned before. There is an example on this in particular in India. This was published in India, but I'll go back to that in a minute. So just to sum up these section on the research gaps, here are some of the research gaps or the questions that we'll still have about digital infrastructure. So we don't know the impact of digital infrastructure on smallholder farmers. We don't know, we need to secure data sharing mechanisms that balance the benefits of data-driven agriculture. We need to ensure that different platforms and devices can work together, so interoperability. We need to ensure equitable access, again, for all stakeholders, including rural communities and others. And we need to be able to evaluate long-term economic viability of these projects. If there is an option of neutral organizations that are willing to put this in place, are those organizations willing to maintain that in the long term? So this is the first example I wanted to mention about the model on digital infrastructure I mentioned before. This is called VISTAR, Virtually Integrated Systems to Access Agricultural Resources. It's happening in India, and it's fostered or supported by the Indian government. VISTAR revolves around this idea of creation of an open source, open standard, and network that is envisioned to serve as a robust platform that empowers inclusive, farmer-centric solutions while fostering innovation. VISTAR's primary objective in its initial phase is to empower farmers with accurate and timely advisories that are integrated in the same platform. So different types of advisories are all integrated through one channel that is reaching the farmers, and each of them is adding different values and competences to the farmers. So this is mostly an extension service, integrated extension service for farmers in India. This has been in place for 2 years, so we don't have results yet, but it's moving pretty fast and it's moving very interestingly towards collaboration. So they are already onboarding several partners around services, private companies, but also NGOs, big organizations that are willing to contribute to not only provide the content, but integrate the services among the different existing services that are there. So the VISTAR approach also has the whole set of digital contracts. So they have, in their vision, they have these different phases where they're going to be addressing transactions, content distribution, policies, digital contracts, trust and security, and others. The second example is one we have within the CGIAR. It's called e-agrology, and it's an example where we have been able to standardize data collection tools for agronomic data, for weather data as well, for socioeconomic data somehow. We have been using AgriVoc and other ontologies as well to integrate the different options that we have for data collection. We have been attaching that data collection to a digital identity that we're providing not only to the farmers, but to the extension agents and other organizations as well that are locally. This digital identity is over a blockchain system. So we collect that information and we are aiming to secure that information in these data wallets for each of the farmers or for each of the organizations. And then we have a data flow that comes from data collection to impact, saying, okay, we clean that data in the same way. We standardize the cleaning processes, we standardize the ranges that we have for each of the crops. So we have a directory of standardizations that had been shared and agreed among different partners. Then we do different types of analysis that it's a bit more free in terms of standardization. Everyone can do any type of analysis, but that we bring together all the analysis, all the different models that have been created into one interface that it's called AgroTutor. And that interface, as I said, integrates all the models that we use and offers the farmer the different alternatives. Instead of saying, this is what we recommend, we just provide all the alternatives and we say, this is what we know about what you are asking, and you can select whether you want to do it or not. And finally, the impact, we have dashboards for monitoring and evaluation, standardized for KPIs that are required for the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So we're measuring greenhouse gas emissions, water use efficiency, and others that are directly related to the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So in this case, we have more than 100 partners collaborating, collecting data. We have been doing these for 10 years now. These are some of the numbers that we have. We have just published the whole historical data set for Mexico with more than 24 million data points, and it's open. It's there for anyone who wants to use that data. So our approach is also open source. Each of the modules is open to be connected to other modules as well. So learning so far, I think key thing is neutrality matters. So whomever is going to be doing this integration or is going to be leading the first stages of the platforms or of any type of digital infrastructure needs to be neutral, and that needs to be transparent. So neutrality and transparency matters. Trust needs to be there. So main thing is technologies are already there. We know about technologies. We know how to use them. We can strategize about what would be best to do, but that's not the main challenge. The main challenge is building trust among the partners. The main challenge is building trust with the farmers, but also with other colleagues, other stakeholders that are around the digital infrastructure, and building trust to say, and also having a behavioral change in terms of sharing that being together is better than going alone. So we don't have that yet, and trust is not there yet. Also, for that to happen, incentives need to be identified. So we need to understand who has incentive for what to be part of such a platform or such a collaboration effort. And fair principles do help. So to begin with, again, I totally second this idea of working at the portfolio level, trying to understand what is already there, what can be already standardized. We, as in this case, in agrology, we standardized the portfolio of projects that we had within CIMMYT, and we were able to collect the data and to work with those projects at the same level with the same standards, and applying fair principles as well. So we have data that is accessible, that is cleaned, that is usable, that is reusable as well. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrea, for this very rich overview on what all is happening in research, and also for citing some concepts from research and going into the health sector, what is happening there. So you found some cases, I think, of impact there. But I think maybe the hope is that we find the same cases of impact in agriculture also, right? So that's the tricky thing. So it's possible. I think that's maybe is that correct if I say it like this? It is possible, but we don't have the promising case in agriculture yet.
Not yet. Mm-hmm.
Not yet. Good. We have, of course, now we ran a bit late with all these great interventions. So thanks to all the speakers for their hard work in enriching the debate here. I think we have a lot of insights that, like, how metadata is relevant, but it's also really on connecting the building blocks. I see that coming back in all presentations. So we have public goods that are available. These building blocks are there, but how do we connect them? So I will post a link to the Mentimeter in the chat. And while I do that, maybe a question that we got from Ruud to all panelists, which is from Ruud Grim from the Netherlands Space Office, who asked us, is is this primarily a public, should it be these infrastructures, should it be a public responsibility or private responsibility, or what's the role of these two sectors there? Now, I don't know whether you don't have to give an up and down answer, but to give some reflections on that would be good. At the same time, if you want to vote on the Mentimeter, then please go ahead. I have the first votes already, then I will show the results on the first question in a minute. So Ben, maybe for you first. Henry wants to speak about Henry, public versus private.
No, but go for it, Ben. Go for it.
Oh, okay. No. Our perspective on that is government should drive the process. Okay, the public sector, donors, development organizations to support that initial financing of the infrastructure, but it should not be done in isolation with the private sector. It should be done together so that by the time they finish building the infrastructure, business model is built around it, and the private sector sees the business case to now invest in it to ensure sustainability. So you see the role of the public and the private together, not just leaving it for government to build, public free, and then later on call the private sector to come and make sure that it's sustainable. No, it should be done together so that, it's sustainable.
Thanks, Ben. Henry, what's your take on this public versus private question?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I had the pleasure to actually meet with Ruth last week in Rome, and we also discussed this issue. So what I think is key is that it's also in the interest of the private sector to collaborate with public sector on what we call interoperable data services in the pre-competitive space. No? So if I understand correctly, what Ben was saying in his slide and also in his presentation is that oftentimes interventions that are done in countries, they start building the infrastructure from scratch again, because sometimes there's no regulations or there's nothing really available. And that's very costly because it leads to a lot of fragmentation and also unsustainable infrastructure. So if you want to come in as private sector and you want to invest in a country, and you have to do it based on this road network, which is not really working and the legislations are not very clear, it's much more risky. But if you have this digital public infrastructure in place, you can de-risk a lot of the investments from private sector. So, for example, we've been working together with CGIAR and also with partners from World Bank and WEF on what we call the Global Coalition for Data and Digital Food Systems Innovation. It's a long term, where we exactly, and I'll put the link in the chat, where we exactly try to tackle this issue and had long discussions with private sector as well. So many private sector actors contributed to it. To this discussion on how can we build this interoperable data services in the pre-competitive space. So yeah, there are incentives in place for private sector, but we might be able to provide more incentives now. And I think the de-risking is one of the biggest ones.
Thanks, Henry. Andrea, do you have something to add on this public versus private?
Yeah, I would say I tend to assign roles to private and public without really understanding what are the key incentives and the key dynamics within them. So important thing or insight or key learning is each of the partnership models has its own dynamics, and it's good to understand what are the main incentives in each case. So private sector can have an actual active role in terms of even defining key roads of the infrastructure, and that helps a lot when they own the infrastructure from the beginning instead of waiting for the public to provide it.
Okay, yeah, so both should do something, but it's the rules for the game need to be there and for both to really act. Let me share the Mentimeter voting as it has been going on. If you didn't vote yet, then you have an opportunity now to vote. Interestingly, the governance is winning out so far, but I don't know if that's just because we were talking about governance just now, so maybe that's just a luck thing of having the first vote. So please, I will leave it here for 1 minute more, I think, and then we go to the next question on this. So just a bit more. I think most of you seem to agree that yes, we need more governance here. So that could be then maybe with the previous discussion in mind, pointing more to the role of governments also to set the rules and give the governance structures of these digital infrastructures. Good.
Yeah,
Let's go
on the governance part. The way we talk about it is that so the policies need to be developed, driven by the government because the country belongs to them, you know. So the government should drive the development of the, you know, the speed limit, the road signs, you know, the guide and all those things. But when it comes to the implementation, that's where you need an independent entity. Because we spoke to the private sector guys and they said, look, we have data in the countries. We'll be willing to share because we are not even using 20% of the data. But we need trust, as you know, Andrea said, that there should be that trust for me to open my data system to share with others so that when I open it, nobody will take advantage. So a neutral entity that's going to apply those regulations set by the government, you know, that is what is going to make it work. When that happens, then the technology will work, the business model will work, the social part will work, everything will work. So I agree with the voting that the governance is key in this process.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ben, for that addition. I think maybe that links us nicely to the next question I shared on the Mentimeter to think about these incentives. I think that came also back from your intervention, Henry, that incentives are important for parties to join this development. So yeah, I'm now seeing. Let's see what the audience thinks about these incentives. The first incentives are coming on. I think they are. So that's nice, but probably more. So please share your incentives here. I see ground truth data, sharing of data, money, have a win-win. What's maybe, Henry, what's your idea of these incentives, or what are you seeing on the ground between countries or between private and public sector organizations to get involved in this?
Well, one of the reflections I also put in my last slide is that there's a lot of fragmentation. So many interventions at country level include data, have a data component or a digital component. But the outputs of these projects, oftentimes they're not as documented as they could be. So sometimes metadata is not existing, or the data is not stored in sustainable data infrastructures. So, I mean, the use of the outputs of these projects is oftentimes not as big as it could be. Whereas if you have, for example, digital public goods in place, so you know where you can store the data, what kind of software is already being used now, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, as Ben was mentioning in his intervention, then these interventions can be much more effective. So I think fragmentation is a big problem. And the reason for this fragmentation is often because coordination is extremely costly. It takes time. It's not easy, especially if you have to do coordination between some private sector entities with government, public sector, UN agencies. It takes time. It really is a challenge. And oftentimes projects want to show big impact very quickly. You know? So they want to showcase that their intervention has an impact on the ground. So that leads to a lot of duplication, that leads to fragmentation. And it's not as fancy as running a big project where you pull up a fancy website and you show what you've done. It's not as fancy work to really sit down and say, okay, what are sustainable outputs in terms of software, data, content, what kind of standards can be used. That's hard work, and it requires a lot of coordination. But I think if for example, also project are let's say the funding of projects and programs is more looking at building this coordination in as from the outset, then I think we have some incentives in place that can lead to digital public infrastructure, which is much more sustainable.
Thanks, Henry. That's a very, very, I think, inspiring response in the sense also that it requires us to take the long view, not only, not make a quick win with a project and then run away to the next project and make a new fancy website, but really think about the long view and what it means in the future and how, building something digital, small digital, making a data set available could also be a good thing. I think it's maybe like a small incentives in there could be that to see that your data set is being used, even as a researcher, but also as a practitioner in the field, maybe even as a farmer. I think that's also one of the responses we got in the Mentimeter, where someone was saying, well, you have to get something back you have to get some insights back, and that from your making the data available. That's, I think, a very good point to look at the small incentive there. So thanks all for sharing. I think on the Mentimeter we have a rich view of very different incentives. So that's very nice. We are now 4 minutes before we close, so I will just share a few announcements with you on this and the next steps before we close, so that we can all close in time. And
Sander,
yes, Ben,
there's a question. There's a question here that it said, if a majority feels that governance is key, how do we go about harmonizing the governance approach between the 3 levels of operationalization that we saw in these 3 presentations? Interesting question. I don't understand the 3 levels of operationalization. I don't know if Inde can allow the person to, I think it's Christian, and I see the handle over there to clarify the question.
Or we could say email Ben with the clarification.
It's asking all of us, the 3 of us.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I think we have a very rich debate here also on the Q&A and on the chat, so that's very nice. I will just to make sure that we finish on time, because people are different. Maybe it's very late already or very early where you are. Just 2 announcements, I think, before we close. One is that the ICT for Ag conference is coming up at end of May. It's organized by CJAR, by Andrea and colleagues. It's 5 locations around the globe where you can join. Up there, we want to continue this discussion on digital infrastructures. So we are going to propose a challenge, or not a challenge, a session on this in the next days based on these discussions. So if you have ideas or suggestions on what we should include, then send me an email. And that, we hope to see you all back there and have a lively debate again, and maybe take one step further in this in thinking about incentives and thinking about metadata and thinking about how we can activate all players in this. Just a small advertisement for the Digital Agri Hub. We have been nominated for the WSIS Prize 2024 in the category E-Agriculture. So if you have a minute and your time, then please vote for us. I pasted the email address here below, or search it on Google. And yeah, we would really appreciate it. We of course hope to win. That shows that we are doing some relevant work for all of you. So that leaves me with a big thank you for you all joining us today. I think it was very lively. We learned a lot. I think it's a big agreement that we have a lot of building blocks and we have a lot of crucial things available. It's really about how do we get players active in countries at the global level, and that there are also players taking the leading role like the FAO, Commonwealth and CEJA as they shared today. So we hope that this will also enable further discussions on how to do this and maybe further inspiring ideas. If you want to post these ideas, please do that on D groups and share it there. I pasted the link in here. If you have any questions, reach out to me or Inder or Ben or Henry or Andrea. Thanks to the speakers for joining us today, and I wish you all a very good continuation of today, wherever you are. Thanks. With that.
Thank you, Sander. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Inder, for organizing.
Thanks all.
Yeah,
Have a nice evening all.
Henry and Andrea.
Thank you, Val.